All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. It's just the Nifty Claims Training slide, the first slide here. So I'm gonna wait a second. There's a lot of people coming in right now. Okay, seems to have slowed down. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So today we're gonna be talking about the Nifty claims. And so just as an introduction, as of the October 1st dates of service, that MDHHS is requiring agencies to submit community transition services billed as a fee-for-service claims. Many wonder why we're calling this Nifty claims versus CTS claims, and that's because the CTS naming convention was named after we did updates to the Nifty portal, and that was already done in development. So at that point, it was really hard to change that late in development, so we did not do that. So in Compass, we refer to things still as Nifty, even though it's under the new CTS umbrella. So for the most part, when we use the term Nifty, it's relating to transitioning people out of the nursing facility still. So what this training will cover, the setup needed in CHAMPS. There's been a lot of confusion over that we wanted to help clear up. Setup needed in Compass, tips regarding the prior authorization, the data that's needed in episodes, so that you can send claims. It's kind of like the setup of the client information, the transition services in the MISIS care plans, how you bill for those transition services, Nifty claims processing itself, and then reviewing remittances and resubmission of the claims if you have rejections, that is. So to start out, setup needed in CHAMPS. So all of you have done this already, but you had to add a CTS specialty to your My Choice NPI, basically updating your provider enrollment in CHAMPS. So like I said, that's all been done. The other thing that needs to be done that I don't know if is done yet for all of you, but it's that your transition navigators all need to be enrolled as a CHAMPS provider. So that link that's here, and we'll be sending in this presentation out to you too, so you have all this. That was actually from Amanda Farley's information she sent on a call recently. So that's just their instructions on how to do that. And then adding any users to CHAMPS that you need to under the My Choice NPI, which is now also your CTS NPI, for those needing to enter prior authorizations. So just to note that you have to be the domain administrator profile to add users, and there's the link to how you do that in CHAMPS there. So we're not going to go over that. That's all CHAMPS. That's not our system. So, we're just kind of giving you some reference points there so that you kind of knew what you had to do in CHAMPS. The other last thing to do in CHAMPS, which is an ongoing thing, is that prior authorizations will need to be added for everything but the transition navigation service T1016. So setup needed in Compass. So in MISIS, you need to enter a new vendor of type person for each of your transition navigators and make sure to input their NPI. And we just wanted to note taxonomy and social security number are not required, so you can just put their NPI in and skip those two fields. They are not sent to the state, but they do need to be a person type, as they are people, versus non-person is the other option that you normally use, because otherwise it's going to look for federal ID and such. So make sure that those are set up for each of your transition navigators. And then you'd go to the service rate information tab in MISIS and add the T1016 service with a start date of 10/1/2022 with no stop date, and your default units of 4 and default cost per unit for whatever your agency rate is, because that's a per 15-minute unit service. And then any other vendors, if you don't already have them in MISIS already that are providing transition services, then you need that to add those also into MISIS. Note that if the vendor provides the T1016 service, which is your transition navigation, then the NPI is required. So NPI is required for all of your transition navigators. Otherwise, you can leave that blank if not known. You may decide to create new vendors for the CTS itself. So some of you may have current providers right now, and you may want to create basically a duplicate vendor in the system, you can do that. But if the rates aren't going to be different between like My Choice and CTS, like personal care, for instance, if you have personal care vendors, you can use the same one you already have. And if you want, though, you could separate it out if you needed to, but it does make, if the rates don't differ, then there's no real advantage to you. And if the vendors are already using vendor view and vendor billing, then it may be easier for them and your own agency to use the same vendor records that exist already. So we do allow for vendors to have the same NPI and other information if you do want to track it separately. There's some that may want to do this. They do it for other types of programs like My Health Link and such. So we wanted to mention this, but it probably won't be necessary for this um, program. So, but it is an option to you. And then the other thing that needs to happen is every person that's receiving community transition services will need to have an episode added to Compass. So basically, you got to get your vendors in there, get the services entered for those vendors, and get episodes in for participants is what this page is covering. The next thing that has to happen is prior authorizations have to be added for every service except T101 transition navigation services. And you're no longer going to enter these as exceptions in the NFTI portal unless the person never qualifies for Medicaid, which I'm going to cover that a little bit later. But for most people that you're doing these services for, you're going to be entering prior authorizations for everything but T1016. So there's the link on how to do the process in there. What we want to make sure is clear is we do not want you to add any rendering or referring provider information in the prior authorization. The only thing that should be ever listed in there is your own agency NPI, not the transition navigator NPI, your agency NPI, and it will cause many issues that we avoid if you don't input that rendering or referring provider information. It will cause mismatching claims and things like that. So don't put anything in there. The only thing that should go in prior authorization is your own agency's NPI. It will auto-populate. It should auto-populate. And again, that's not your transition navigator's NPI. The only place your transition navigator NPI is going to be sent or seen even is with claims. So technically, you're never going to see it because the claims file is going to have it behind the scenes. But that's the only place really that transition navigator NPI is needed is for claims, not for your prior authorization. Because prior authorization, you're not sending it for T1016, you're only sending it for everything else. So that's why it's not a transition navigation NPI. Once it's approved, you're going to receive a 10-digit authorization number, and that will need to be input in MICE's care plans, and we're going to go through that in a second. So make sure you record that 10-digit authorization number, because in order for claims to get approved, that number will need to be sent in claims, and the way we're going to do that is putting that in MICE's care plans. So data needed in episodes. All participants receiving the CTS services need to have a Compass episode added. The intake date should be on or prior to the first transition service date. If you don't, then you can't bill for it because the episode has to cover the billing dates. Program status of transition navigation. And it's very key here, you're using transition navigation and not NFTI. So there are right now 2 program statuses, and we're going to go through that in a minute too to explain that better. But transition navigation's program status, this must be also on or prior to the first transition service date. If the person transitions and enrolls in one of your own agency programs, and then that enrolled program should be entered in the program status, such as waiver Y, regardless if the transition navigator is still following the person, because waiver trumps the transition navigation. So if you have somebody you're serving that you're providing transition services to, and they become My Choice, put that waiver Y status in as of that date, you can still continue that transition navigation service even if enrolled in another program, just as you do now. So care plans and bills can still continue. Don't worry about that part. It's just that transition navigation ends pretty much when some other program takes over for your own agency. So enrolled program staff are going to use that episode 2 for completing assessments and progress notes as usual. So you're not going to create a new episode or anything when you're switching over from transition navigation to waiver. However, Transition navigators should not be conducting the IHC assessments. So don't have them, finalize assessments in there. They have the CTA, they should stay to the CTA. If the person is waiver Y, the first assessment is what's used to determine that 90-day reassessment. So it won't be triggered if they start adding their own assessment dates. So they should not be touching IHC assessments, just CTAs. Your My Choice team would do the IHC assessments. So transition navigation versus the NIFTY program status. I know this is a thing that a lot of you have had questions about recently, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So they both exist because you can transition participants both with and without transition services. Transition navigations for those that transition with transition services, and NIFTYs for those that transition without transition services. So if you look at the little picture at the bottom, you can see that the person's coming in the nursing home. They have two ways of coming out. They're coming out with transition services here, and that becomes transition navigation to bring them home, or no services needed, and you're just taking them out and putting them, you're skipping the whole CTA process. You're not doing any of that. You're just, keeping them on NIFTY to open them, and you just start the episode and then transition My Choice or whatever other program they may come out to. It's important to use the correct program status because transition navigation allows program statuses to overlap at different agencies. So if you guys are, somebody's doing the transition navigation and going to transfer it to another agency, probably because they're going to move into a different area, then that other agency can open them up and put them in the program while you continue doing transition navigation, and you can have that overlap of program status. You cannot do that with NIFTY. So NIFTY does not allow for overlapping program status because its intent is to transition them without services. So some of you may need to go in and change existing records on these if you've already set them up, that anybody that's receiving CTS services should have the transition navigation program status. Otherwise, you can keep NIFTY if that's not the case. And I guess I should answer the question too that'll come up. Do you have to fix them? You don't necessarily have to fix them right now, just it should be best practice from this point forward to make them transition navigation for anybody that you're working on. But if if there's not going to be an overlap chance right now, there's not really a need to switch them unless you want to make sure that like you could run an enrollment report and find out how many people are in transition navigation versus NIFTY. If that's important to you, then you could clean up the historical data on it. If it's not, then I wouldn't worry about it. And just from this point forward. Transition services and MISIS care plans. You're going to enter new transition services care plans in MISIS. Ongoing services prior to NIFTY claims should have a start date of 10/1/2022. So so basically you're going to have to create new care plans for everybody that you are currently working on between 9/30 and 10/1. If they're still continuing, then that 9/30 should stop with the old fund source code and put in a new care plan with the new fund source of 1/12 and start date of 10/1/2022. Otherwise, it can be whatever date that they occur on in the future like you normally would, but now you're going to use fund source 1/12 for everything. Services that occur regularly like T1016 should be entered with one care plan, and if multiple transition navigators are providing the same participant those T1016 services, then each will need their own care plan with the appropriate vendor, aka their transition navigation vendor selected. So if you do have people, two or more transition navigators going to be working with the person, then each one of them needs their own care plan in MISIS. There has been confusion about can multiple transition navigators provide services the same day. Because how we've implemented the system, you can. So do not worry about that. If it happens, bill it that way, do whatever you want to do. What's going to happen is that the system automatically picks one of them to bill the claim against so that the claims will be paid. So don't worry about that on your end. You can post whatever they do as appropriate, and we just automatically pick one when it happens. That was something that we had to do way back with My Choice, so it was already set up, and it's not a big deal. So the state may say you cannot because of that reason, but you can because the system's dealing with it. Then you're going to enter templates to each care plan. So add the type of template for the repeat pattern if it applies, because most will probably be one-time only services besides things like T1016, And for that, you could add weekly or monthly template with approximately how much you predict you'll do, just in order to get bills to be posted against it, because you need to have a template in order for the bills to get verified or show up in vendor billing. If you're going to use the vendor billing system to bill, you need to have that. So if you bill more than what was predicted, you don't need to update the care plan template. Just post the bills, unless your agency has some processes that you want them to match, that to the system. It does not matter. As long as there's something covering that month in a template, be it a weekly or monthly, it doesn't care, like, if it matches or anything. Alternatively, you could enter multiple one-time services as they occur, but that's a lot more work to do in both care plans and then post the bills too. So it's probably easier for you to set up templates for ongoing things. Obviously, one time you just do one-time template and be done with it. The other thing to note is that claims only allows for whole unit amounts. So make sure you do not enter any decimals in unit fields. So you can't do a half hour or anything like that, 0.5. No, it's all 1, 2, 3 and ongoing. You cannot do decimals. It won't round up. It'll produce errors when you try to do claims. Prior authorization and MISIS templates. So you're going to be entering prior authorization numbers in the template time section of the MISIS templates. So every service other than T1016, you need to do this. So it basically, you click on this little times icon when you're inside the template, and then it'll bring you to this page, and you're going to enter the prior authorization number there. So it needs to be there. It's going to error before, it won't send claims without it. You shouldn't have any other numbers in there in that field. And I'll get back to that in a second. The claims will be held back from being submitted and show on the bill-related error report if a prior authorization number is needed or has too little or too many numbers. So these are some acceptable times notes and some bad ones. So it basically, what happens is it uses the first consecutive digits it finds and evaluates if that's 10 and only 10 digits. If that's not the case, then it's going to produce an error on that bill-related error report. So these are some examples, some good. So you can put a note in and put the prior authorization. That's fine. You can put the prior authorization before some note. You could put the authorization in between notes. You can even do it this way, because the gap is here and these aren't consecutive. It doesn't care. However, what you can't do is not enough digits. I only have 9 digits in this one, so that's going to be an error. This one is the first 10 consecutive digits. It finds 3 because this hyphen is a character. So it says it's too short because it's 555. So that's bad. So don't put phone numbers in here. I don't know why you would. This was just example purposes. I don't know why what number would be in there anyway, but digit split. So you can't do 1, 2, 3 and then put some text in and then the rest of it. That it's going to error. And in this case, there was too many digits. So make sure that you're putting them in one of these types of patterns to avoid errors. Then you're going to bill for these transition services. So there's two options here. You could have the vendor post bills and send to the agent like they do in vendor billing, and then you as the agency approve the bills, or the vendor could send paper bills to you and you post the bills and verify the bills, or in the case that you're the vendor, obviously you post the bills and verify the bills for like transition navigation purposes. So either way, doesn't matter. However you do billing now, you can continue to do billing the same way. It's just going to be against those 112 fund sources instead of the old one. So then nifty claims processing. So what we've done is we've updated our regular claims processing module to include both TCM and nifty funded bills. So if your agency already provides TCM and also provides the transition services, then you will want to make sure you determine who's going to do this process now. Because if bills are posted, verified, and approved, they get sent, and there's not an option to only send one program or fund. So basically, you're going to want to make sure that if you have somebody that does the TCM billing, maybe you want them to do also the transition services billing. Or maybe you say, okay, the TCM person is going to do it at this time of the month, and they're only going to verify those 107 TCM bills, and then the transition services, maybe the transition navigators are going to do the claims and do it for the rest of them. And so you could do it that way. It's probably not the best to do both because there's going to be chances that the others are going to slip into the batches. So, um, basically, you're going to want to try to figure out how you want to do that from now on. And it may be the same person that does TCM. It may be the person that does the My Choice Encounters. You just need to determine who's going to do the claims. The processes between claims and encounters are very similar. They mirror each other. So there's slight differences, but it'll be very familiar to anybody that's done any processing before. Um, so as I said, they'll be sent together monthly if your agency is providing both programs, and it's fine. There's no problem with that. It's just on your end, it might be shocking had you not known that. Um, Users that do the claim processing need to have the claims processing add change permission. Do not assign the add change permission to others that just want to view the reports and see the screen and they don't actually process anything, because that causes, there's 5 email addresses that are allowed to be in there to use to notify when the eligibility request files come back. And if there's too many people, more than 5, then you could have 5 email addresses for people that aren't even doing the work. And so that's been a problem in the past. So users that just want to get to the reports and see what's going on in there, they just need the view privilege. Only add change is needed if they are maybe the backup to the person that's actually going to do the process. And then claims should be submitted monthly, just like they are for My Choice and TCM now. So reviewing remittances and resubmissions. So claims are fee for service, which FFS is the shorthand for that you may see in the future. And as such, you're going to receive payment when the claims are approved. There are scripts in the Reports Portal Clear Access tab under the claims category that can be used to view the statuses. However, right now they are mostly geared to TCM. We are waiting on somebody to do this and get some remits back to test the scripts that we've now developed, to tweak them. So they will be available shortly for more of them, but right now that's where they'll be, from the after we've published the new ones. So we'll send out an email to look for that when that time comes. We are going to review any rejections that come in and contact agencies individually if they occur. We've pretty much built the system that, besides the case of eligibility, which you should know before you even submit them, and it will hold them back, the claims for 6 months until they're eligible. And so theoretically, we shouldn't have anything come through, but we're going to monitor it for a while because we want to make sure that there's no problems with the software, resolve any issues that maybe the state said this wasn't going to happen and is happening, and we can work with them to get things resolved. So there is no process on your end to review them right now besides clear access scripts. So if we contact you and there's rejections that you actually have to do some work with to get them resolved, then once you've done that, then we're going to have you submit a help desk ticket indicating the claims that you want resent. And that will be needed to be accompanied by a file uploaded to the Secure File Exchange, unless you're posting directly in the help desk portal, because we don't want you to email sensitive information. That includes the person's full name, full SSN, and either the agent CRN or the service code and dates of service, and then we can update the bills to be resent with your next claims process. So ineligible for Medicaid, this is the other piece that we just found out recently, that if those who are not on Medicaid or are pending yet, the state was advising that you should not add care plans until that Medicaid is determined. You can't apply for the prior authorization yet. You don't really know where they're going to land. If deemed ineligible, then enter the care plans and templates with the fund source 996 like you always did in the past, and post those bills to that fund source, or have the vendors post and verify, whatever, all that jazz. Those bills are not going to be sent as claims because 996 is not sent as claims. Now, alternatively, if you don't want to wait until determining Medicaid, you could put them in now and put them in Fund 112, but if they end up ineligible, then you'll have to create new care plans and templates to that Fund 996 And if the bills were already posted too, then you need to edit those bills to the Fund 996 as well. And then if those things happen, you need to run that transition expenditures clear access script that we've had for a while. Not everybody's been using it, but you run that for the month and paste those results into the spreadsheet that is also accompanying with it. They're both in the reports portal clear access tab under the services category, and paste it into there, and then save that spreadsheet and upload it to the state via the secure file exchange for payment. So that's only if they're ineligible for Medicaid will you have to do that, because they have to pay you differently because they can't go as claims if they're not eligible for Medicaid. So basically do the same process pretty much you were before. All right, so this is questions, but actually I should have entered a slide here because I'm not quite done. So I touched about all the information that you need to know to get things set up, but I've not actually gone through the claims process itself. And I didn't want to waste time in creating a PowerPoint on all that when the user guide has it all. So I'm just going to walk you through our user guide here to show you this information. I can't really demonstrate in the system due to the fact that all of this information requires real stuff, and I can't show you real things. So I'm going to use the user guide to explain some of this stuff. So,
hey, Melissa, can you zoom in on that so people can see it?
oh, is it really small?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So this talks about how the claims originate from bills posted to certain fund sources. So in this case, claims pull from fund sources 107 and 112, 107 being TCM and 112 being transition services. It has a little bit of history here. It talks about the remittance schedule, the policy for the ASA, which applies to the TCM side. But basically claims always work that you have a year to submit them before they will start rejecting. So, but you're supposed to get these in monthly, and hopefully it won't take a year. What's basically the process is you do the process and create a batch. We review the data to make sure there's no problems, and we submit the 837 professional file. Basically, we do that every day and submit them to the state. And then the rule of thumb generally is that if you create a batch by noon on Tuesday of each week, they're usually submitted to CHAMPS that day before 5. And if that happens, then usually CHAMPS will have that processed and sent to CIM the Wednesday evening of the following week. So, if you get it in by Tuesday of a week before 5, well, probably by noon, 5 for us, noon for you, then you'll see the remittance processed the next week. And the payment date is Thursday usually. Although lately I'm seeing them as Wednesday, so don't quote me on that. We'll see how this goes with the addition of transition services. They do issue remittance advices with details on each claim submitted. They're available in the archive documents in CHAMPS. And they also send via mail if you had a mailing address with that location for a remittance advice, but most people don't have that anymore. The claims will have it. You'll be able to query it in clear access, etc. Now, TCM payments aren't issuing payments, but the transition services will. So so transition services should be sending payment when claims are adjudicated in the weekly pay cycle. So, I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'm assuming that you guys have that set up with the state to generate an EFT or a check that's mailed to you to get paid for these things as you submit files. So that's basically what that's about. This just talks about agent information that's required. This is all set up for all of you already, so I'm just going to skim past this. This is our claims processing quick steps. So those people that are new to this process and kind of want the quick and easy to remind themselves what they have to do, this is that. So this is just a quick little reference guide to tell you this is the order of the steps to do the processing of claims. The processing screen looks like this, and the first thing you need to do is select the month and year. And once you select the month and year, more things become available in buttons down below, and I'm going to walk you through all this. This is that box with the email that I talked about a minute ago that has a max of 5 here. You click add button to add yourself to be notified when the 271 is processed, because basically as part of this, it's checking eligibility on all these people you're about to send the claims for, and it's going to tell you that they're eligible or not. And so if you want to, and then that also, we have to wait for that to come back before you can continue processing. So adding your email here says, send me the notification when it's processed so that you know to come back in here and complete your batch. Down here are the buttons of the processing stages. And in this bottom is the batches that you've already created. And so it tells you which batch ID it was assigned, the batch month, year, the process begin date, and a few reports. I actually didn't update this and need to. The claims detail is no longer, because claims summary is the claims detail in nowadays. So there's only the 3 reports there now. So step 1, select month and year. So in these nice big blue, those are your main steps. The first, so once you select the month and year, so every month, like now it's October, you'd be submitting in September, theoretically. And so when November hits, you'd be doing your first transition service claims. And the first thing you want to do after you select the month and year is check for unverified bills. Once you select the month and year, like here, then this report shows up down below, and you click that report and it will show you if you have any unverified bills, and it shows you who, which is, real stuff, so it's grayed out, and the date range that needs to be verified. This report should be clean. So if you see any in here, then you need to go into the MySys variance verification module and get those bills verified. They automatically are verified if they come through the vendor billing process. As they're approved, they're automatically verified. But if you post them in MySys or do edits in MySys, then they need to be verified there. So this is kind of the check for that. So it talks about how you go about verifying said bills. So that process is there. Excuse me. So then processing. So the next step you do is you click this process button in that line. And that's going to get the bill information, your agency information, the participant and address info. And for a TCM, it gets the next assessment info, or the living CTA for the nifty people's primary diagnosis, because primary diagnosis is required to be sent in claims. So this, once you can actually do these anytime. You could do multiple batches a month if you want. If you want to get paid sooner, that's fine. We don't care per se, and there's no limit on any of this. It just takes, a little bit to wait for the eligibility to come back. So the first thing that talks about happening is we check the data for errors and then verify that eligibility by sending a 270 request file. And then the nice thing about claims is you can leave the encounters page and this should say claims, copy paste jobs here. You can leave the processing pages and come back, and it doesn't reset anything. You can exit at any time. There's no loss of anything in there. So you don't have to stay on the page while you wait for the 271 file to come back, etc. So if there's bills less than a year old, then the claims process could take up to 24 hours from start to finish, because we need to wait for that eligibility request file to return. If it's over a year old, we can't query the eligibility information from CHAMPS. It's probably going to get rejected too if you send it. Not that you shouldn't send it. You should always send whatever we have. But then it wouldn't actually query for the eligibility in those cases. So it goes faster, I guess. It's what that's saying. Selecting users for the email notification that I mentioned, with the max of 5 user emails to get notified. And then once you've selected that, then you can click the process button. And then if there are times that if you want to click the process button, it may not be enabled, because after selecting the month and year, it's going to look, do you have bills to send? And if it doesn't, it's going to tell you at the top there's no bills to process. Otherwise, it will try and process them. So it's going to look for verified bills only for purchase services with the 107 or 112 fund source. It's going to look for service dates on or before the last date of the user specified selected month and year. So if I pick, December, and I have bills that haven't been sent for October, November, and December was the one I selected, it's going to pick up everything from October and November as well as December to send. It grabs everything before the last date of that month and year selected. And it only, though, looks for things that haven't been sent or need to be resent. So it's going to make sure that criteria is reviewed and make sure that you don't have any missing information. There are 2 error reports that will describe any problems with it. There's a refresh button if you want to refresh to see when it's done with the process, or you can leave the page and come back, whatever. This talks about them, how the eligibility inquiry is sent, and they are usually received, and they automatically send when they go. And if usually we get files between noon and 1, and then 9 p.m. daily. So the earlier in the morning you send it, you might get a chance to get it back by noon or 1. Otherwise, they'll come back that evening, and they'll be ready to go the next morning. And so the next step you're going to do is look at the errors on the error reports and fix any issues if you can. So while waiting for that 271 file to come back, you can start reviewing and fixing them, any of the issues on there. So they show up, the buttons show up on the claims processing screen like that unverified bills report does, and you can then examine that. So any errors on these reports will hold bills until they're resolved. So we do not send anything to Medicaid unless the data is clean. So you need to work at whatever's on those reports you need to fix, or they're never going to get sent, and you won't get paid in the case of the transition services. So make sure that that's happening. Don't ignore these things. They are required to be fixed. So if you can wait to fix it, maybe there's things that you can't deal with right now, you're waiting on somebody, that's fine. We're not going to hold up from processing and finishing a batch because you have a few problems. You can keep continuing. Just those bills will not be marked as sent. It won't go on the process, but the next time you create a batch, they'll be pulled again, because it always grabs things not sent yet on or before the last date of the month and year selected. So the only exception to that is if you change the Social Security number or Medicaid ID, because if that happens, those are key fields to the claim, and it basically drops them out of that batch if that happens, and then it would go in your next batch. So you could wait to send those into another batch after the fact, or you could cancel this batch and start a new one to get those guys in there. Up to you. It's just going to have to send another 270 and wait for that. So you might just want to continue with what you got, and then the next month those guys will come through, or do another one after that. So the first report it's talking about is the participant related claims error report that needs to make corrections. It checks for missing data or problematic data. So this is an example here of that report. It shows the person's information. There's 2 types of errors, SSN and address. Otherwise, the rest of these are missing data. So primary diagnosis is a field. So for TCM services, it's looking at the next assessment. And for NIFTY, it's looking for the living CTA. So you need to have valid ICD-10 codes that are acceptable. And I already see an error because this is my problem, that we have an error right now that we're not allowing E codes, and that's bad. That's my fault. So we'll be updating this user guide to say that doesn't have to start with E. Will go as soon as we fix it. But anything that is V, W, X, or Y won't even be allowed to be added into the system now. So those are not acceptable codes. But primary diagnosis needs to be there in either of these 2 places. Not either, the appropriate place, because NIFTY won't have TC, the next assess for it. It's only going to look at the living CTA. This just talks about where the rest of that information it's looking for that. And address fields, note that those are obtained from the address the person lived at on the bill's date of service based on the address start and stop date fields. So it's not the most recent. So you do need to make sure you're updating the right one based on the bill dates in there. Let's see. Bill should not occur until the first assessment date. So in that case, it'd be your CTA date. It's not really going to care so much. It's looking always at the living, but just the rule of thumb there. And it's just talking about if you need to change it there. I'm not going to worry about that. SSN, we do not allow dummy SSNs to be sent. So if you have a dummy SSN, then it needs to be changed to the real one in order to send the claims. Address is the other error in there. You cannot have a PO box or a special character such as a colon or asterisk in the address one field. And the address one field also has to have numbers. So basically make sure that you're not putting a facility name in the address for when they go, for in the related to the thing. It needs to have the actual address. So not the facility name, has to be an address one, because we need a physical to send. So facility names can go into address 2 and the actual physical address and address 1. So then bill related claims, error reports. So this is an example of that. There are several different issues on here of missing data, errors, and one warning. So this is an example of all of them. So basically, all of these services here, S5150, 5165, and T1019, they are producing a missing data for prior authorization. At the end of the report is the key for what all these mean. So PA is prior auth. So that's what that shorthand stands for. So prior authorization is missing, meaning I need to go into those MISIS templates and put that in the template times note. This first one is erroring as a service match, because S5150 is not an allowable service for Nifty. So honestly, it doesn't matter about the prior authorization because you shouldn't have built that anyway. This next one is an example. This is a TCM one actually that has a PC warning, meaning pending claim. It's going to hold it because right now it's already waiting for a resolution to the first claim that was sent for this, and it's related to that. And it looks like in this case, it got sent. We're waiting on it to be paid probably for the original amount. And now it's saying, never mind, I don't want to get paid that amount. And the credit's trying to come through, but it's going to wait for the resolution of that pending claim before it can send this. Because if it gets rejected, then I don't even need to send this because nothing needs to be paid. So versus if it does get paid, then I have to send this as a void claim. So it really depends on the situation that happens at the once it's processed at the state. So we have to wait for that before those happen. So you may see these, and there's nothing you need to do about warnings. It's not a problem. It's just the next batch, or if if this batch takes longer and you reprocess, it might be cleared by then too, depending on timing. But yeah, so you don't have to worry about those. The ones you need to worry about are missing data and errors. And so a bunch more prior authorizations on here. Then there's a VN, that's the vendor NPI. NPI is required for T1016. So that means that in the vendor record in MISIS, that was missing. So it needs that once that's put in, then this error go away. Another service match error because T1017 was used, and that's no longer the right TN code anymore. And then there's a missing prior authorization, and then there's an error for prior authorization. So the missing means you didn't put it in at all. The error means that I found some stuff, but it's not right. So those are some of the examples we showed in there, that if, like that partial phone number came first, so it saw the first 3, that would be an error. Versus it doesn't find any numbers, then it'd be the missing. And then there's a couple others. The EU is excessive units. You can't have more than 1 unit per month for the T2023 TCM service, so it produces that error. Less than 0 is this other guy, so if somehow it totaled up to be less than 0, I can't even figure out how you can get that to happen nowadays, but it will check for it and report that if that happened. It's got to be some crazy shenanigans to get that to happen in the system. So, and then PU is the other one I didn't talk about, and that's partial units. So that's where I mentioned earlier, only whole numbers, 0.5 and such is not allowed. So you have to fix that. So basically anything on this report besides warnings, you need to go and fix in the bills to resolve them. If it's a service match situation, then the way to resolve that is you figure out, oh, that's the wrong service coding. I needed to bill it to a different service code. Fine. Then you'll need to, set that up, change the bills over to that other service code and verify them. And then that error will disappear. Or if, oh, this isn't even billable, just delete the bill, verify that edit, and then it will go away in your next batch. So in here, it talks more about every one of these errors so that you know what needs to be done. So in detail that I just talked about. And let's see. I'm not seeing anything too exciting other than here. The only service matches, you're going to get service matches for If you use any code other than T2023 with 107, or the Nifty programs, have their set of codes, and it talks about that, etc. So there's that pending claim you don't have to worry about. So persistent errors. If you continue to see things up month after month for the same reason and the data looks correct, it means that there's bills that need to be sent to Champs to adjust a prior payment. This shouldn't happen. If you do find things on there all the time and it's not related to bills that aren't verified, that clean it up, etc., is really what that's talking about, then send it to us, including the full SSN care plan line number, dates of service, upload that to the Secure File Exchange, and then we can take a peek at what's going on, because there could be a problem. It happens sometimes. Things get goofed up in the background, so we can look at that and resolve that. But the key to remember is if you ever are making edits, make sure you're verifying the bills. Make sure you're looking at unverified bill report and getting them verified so things can come through. Otherwise, it doesn't evaluate on bills that aren't verified. So that's important. So once all those reports are cleaned up to the best of your thing, and the 271 eligibility response file comes back, the 271 file, when it comes through, is going to load all of the insurance information that we get from the state, including My Choice and Medicaid eligibility dates and straight Medicaid, and it also will show the transition services benefit plan that the state's putting on your people. And when you click the reprocess button, it's basically going to associate that data to all of the bills, so it knows what to send in the claim file for you. So you guys don't have to worry about attaching the TPL, third-party liability information. The system's going to do it for you. It's basically going to regurgitate what the state sends us, so therefore it can't be inaccurate. So that you can, not get dinged for the TPL part of it. So it handles all that for you. It's also going to, on the reprocess, check if the bills and participant-related errors got fixed, and so then the reports, when you run them again after reprocess, they should be clean. If you did the changes necessary, otherwise it'll show what's still remaining. And you can reprocess as many times as you want to keep trying to fix that data. The only thing is that those missing Medicaid IDs or SSNs that were changed in between, they can't be fixed and reprocessed because they're key, and so they kind of drop out of this one and they'll go in your next one. It also reprocess will find related bills. It has to be the same SSN, service procedure, and dates of service. So if you had, let's say you were billing personal care and the 1st and the 15th were billed, and then they added the 16th, and that's verified now, and you're reprocessing, the 16th is not going to get picked up because it's a different date of service. However, if there was a change to the 1st or 15th that got verified, and in this, then when you reprocess, that would get included as part of the reprocess. We'll pull that as well. And that will help pull those errors that are like the service matches and that they now show a total of 0. So those are good, and you fixed them. And so that's how that will work. And then, yeah, once you've reprocessed, rerun those error reports, like I mentioned, and to make sure that everything's done that you mean. The other thing, there's going to be another report that shows up, the Champs differences report. And it will show data differences, ineligible bills, rejected client requests, and status mismatch. So those are 4 different sections that we present the data to you from that eligibility request. Now, the important thing to know is that you cannot run this report later. It only shows what was retrieved for that batch being processed, and it's a timely thing. So we don't let you see it forever because you change the program status, as you change their information about the person, and so it's irrelevant after that point. So so once you create the batch, that or cancel the batch, either way, then that report is gone. So you want to make sure if you want to keep a record of it, you can print it or save it to your file system so that you have it. But it's you want to make sure that you capture that because it will go away. So data differences, those are going to show you differences in the name of the participant, like spelling and issues. It can be vitally important if you find somebody on there that the names don't match at all. And it might be a whole nother person that somehow that you have that Medicaid ID of someone else, and that could, be a potential worry that happens. So pay attention to that. Minor misspellings, you can correct it or if you want or not, but the name being way different would be a concern. And you would not want to send that. You'd want to cancel that batch and go fix it. There's also, it shows SSN differences. So if you do come through with a dummy SSN, but it comes back with the real one, then you could change that. But again, those people will drop out of this process at that point because that's a key that changes. And then this talks about the different name. Ineligible bills is the other part. So ineligible bills are showing things that are not eligible for the dates of service listed per CHAMPS. So it's grouped by person and date range. Some or all of these may also be in the rejected client request section, because if it rejects the information to begin with, then it's going to consider them ineligible, because basically ineligible is checking for the lack of an eligible record. So if it gets rejected, because rejected client requests are showing people that are able to be processed in CHAMPS, and it's usually caused because the Medicaid SSN or date of birth are wrong. Not usually date of birth, they're not usually that sensitive, but if that information is wrong, it will reject the client request. Or if maybe they're not in their system yet, because they're not active Medicaid, it'll reject too. So you could get dupes between those two for that reason. So it may require MDHHS to fix their data. So make sure you notify the local MDHHS field office of that problem. And these two types, the ineligible bills and rejected client requests, will hold the bills back from being sent unless the bill is over 6 months old. So regardless of CHAMPS conflicts, the system's going to send it will send anything over 6 months old, because there's a policy to submit claims within 6 months to CHAMPS. So these do not require the immediate attention as the name differences do, because it's going to hold them back. But data differences is not going to hold them back. It doesn't care about that. So if you do see a name difference, you want to stop immediately. If the other two are present, it's just saying, yeah, so it's not eligible. We're not going to send this yet until either you fix something or the state fix something. And in another batch, it's going to hold them back for 6 months. After 6 months, they go, regardless. So that's when you could get an eligibility rejection, is if you didn't get fixed in the first 6 months. And then the last one is the status mismatch. And this is going to report any differences between the eligibility dates between CHAMPS and COMPASS status. And so there's it's not a complete comparison of your data, because we only can inquire a maximum of 3 months per inquiry. We only inquire for the bill period being submitted. So it's not going to be a complete comparison of all your data. It's only going to check for whatever bills you've got. But it should find minor date differences that need to be corrected either in CHAMPS or in COMPASS status. So don't use dates shown on these reports for status changes. They're billing date ranges. They are not actual eligibility periods that show on there. So, but it will show you if they're not Medicaid eligible, etc. on there. And then anything over a year old is also will show up. Because they're over a year old, we can't get the information from CHAMPS, so they're excluded. And we do not evaluate transition navigation because it can overlap with other agency programs. They're not evaluated as part of status mismatch, so it's only really going to be looking for Medicaid or not on there, not transition navigation itself, because we can't really rely on that, because you can, they may not have it. So on our you may not have transition navigation on our end, I should say, is to compare. So we just eliminated using that. So you're not going to see a comparison of the CTS benefit plan versus transition navigation on our end. We're only going to be checking that they're eligible or not for CTS services. So it'll be an ineligible bill if it's not eligible for the CTS benefit plan. So then here's an example, all kind of faded out here, but red's bad. And I'm not sure why the green is, because it's just a different field. But pay attention to those differences if you see them. But these are the 4 sections and what they would look like. So like I mentioned earlier, if the CTS benefit plan doesn't match your CHAMPS or your COMPASS status, we are not going to put that here. It's only if the CTS benefit plan is not present for transition navigation services, then they'll show up in the ineligible bills section. So then correct any issues from this if you can. Um, Sometimes that takes longer and you're never going to wait on that. So you're just going to go, unless, like I said, that name difference, don't go, cancel. Um, but then once you're satisfied with what's there, then you can click the create batch button. And then if you click the refresh button, it'll check, periodically when it's sent. These shouldn't take very long because they're never going to be that big compared to like My Choice Encounters. And so then what happens is it pushes that information in the bottom half of the screen, like I showed you earlier, with that you can then run the reports against. It marks the bills that they were sent with what CRN, so it knows it doesn't have to send it again. There is a chance if you have a whole bunch of errors that ends up that they have nothing eligible to send in it, you could create it will then say there's no claims for this batch, and it'll give an error and it deletes the process, and sends an email stating it was deleted because of that, unless there's no users selected in the add email section up at the top, then we get an email about it. But that's just saying that, basically you had nothing to send because they all have problems. And let's see. So then any batch reports you want to see, there's samples in here later. But there's a batch report that just is the top level. So it's the batch ID, the beginning and ending claim reference number, total number of claims, total units and total cost of the batch, and then total cost for the selected month and year. And it also separates the totals for NIFTY and TCM claims too. Then the summary report is kind of all the detail. It tells you, exactly what got sent for which dates of service, etc. And then the verified bills not yet sent report, that is ones that basically, those are the ones that are being held back because of errors on the reports. So those are the ones that you still have to resolve. And so on those ones, they don't get marked with a sent to MSA date. They just remain there until the next time it'll try to send them again. And hopefully the errors are resolved on them. So that's basically the process. So then what happens after that is CIM picks up the ball after you've created the batch, and we create the HIPAA 837 professional claim file from it. It's automated, but we do manually look at each claim and run one check against it right now. In that we check to make sure that the ICD-10 code is valid for the dates of service, because of the situation where your next assessment may have, like right now, for instance, if you create a claim right now for September dates of services, your next assessment probably has the latest and greatest ICD-10 codes, which that code may not be active for September dates of service. And think going forward, because obviously we aren't sending September for transition services right now. So anyway, we check that and then update it to the correct one to go, so it doesn't get rejected, because we just don't have that granular level of ICD codes for date ranges. So we fix that, and then we create the file. And so we push the button and it does a lot of lovely things that I'm glad I don't have to do by hand. So basically it makes up, each day is a claim, and it groups claims by agent, participant, service, procedure, and date of service. And it's either an original claim, meaning I've never been paid before, I need to go as an original, or these two special kinds. And we talk about the special kinds because they're very different. There's replacement claims, and that's saying that, hey, I had something paid before and I need to replace it with this now. And so it goes as a different claim type code of 7, and it gets the information of the prior one that was paid, so it can say, yeah, I'm adjusting this guy. And so you don't have to worry about any of that. The system automatically figures it out. Same thing with void claims, except void claims mean that the total 0. So that means you deleted everything about it, but it was paid before, so now we need to send it this to take that money back. So those will happen automatically by the system based on what bills are coming through. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about the claim file format. It's all done for you on our end. It does all the lovely looping and putting the rendering provider information in, and the place of service and the diagnosis codes and all that stuff that you watched in horror on the state's training. You don't have to do all that. It's automatic, done for you behind the scenes. And so all you're doing is doing bills and doing the processing, create the batch, and then we take care of all the submission of the file part. So like I said, we review the claim data, and then we create the file, and then we ship it over to the state, and wait for then it to come back. So It is the responsibility of each agent to monitor claim status and resolve errors causing rejected claims. Um, and then if you see anything unexpected that you can't figure out what to do, then let us know and we can investigate. And right now we're going to be doing that for you until we get our feet wet with this new stuff. And there's probably likely to happen that they'll reject things for unusual reasons that we'll have to resolve with the state on your behalf. So we'll take care of all of that. And then there's claims views and clear access that are updated as we get files in. It's usually weekly. We don't, I mean, that's an automatic thing. It's not like we're pushing any buttons here, so that you can see everything. It talks here about the claim status codes of whether they're paid, rejected, or it says pended, but we don't get pended anymore. That's a very long time ago. Or reversed is the other thing. So there's two paid statuses. Technically, there's three. There's process primary, secondary, tertiary. We don't really use the tertiary one. If we get it, we update it to be not that, because it's just confusing, and they added that later in the life. 4 is rejected, so that tells us that they didn't pay it. We're also going to be watching to make sure that they're not paying things at 0, because that's a possibility. And so CIM will monitor that as well for now, and to make sure everything's getting done correctly. 22 reversed. This is a situation where they paid it, and then on their own they decided to take it back. So meaning you didn't initiate it to be taken back. That can happen. It's very rare. It often happens if they load like the national date of death stuff and find out that it's they passed away on a date you billed for, or you billed after the date of death, I should say. That could happen. But a reversed also will happen based on what you initiate. So if we send a replacement or void claim, then that guy will be paid, and then the paid one will then be updated to be reversed. That's how it works. So that's, if you see status code 22, it just means ignore it. It's not paid anymore. The only ones you care about is what gets paid, and obviously fix what's rejected. So there's that. The scripts will all show this for you too and whatnot. I'm just kind of explaining this for you to understand a little bit. 4 types of claim statuses. There's national HIPAA status codes that are the 1, 2, and 4. So this is all national reasons that these things exist. You don't have to do anything with paid claims unless you need to adjust it, which you adjust the bills. You could see remark codes on those, but that just means they're information only, so you don't have to worry about them. And so let's see. So they have had problems in the past. I don't know if this is true anymore, because we haven't had this. TCM's just so little that we don't know what they're going to do anymore, but they have in the past. They have done a paid at 0 situation instead of reversing previously paid claims. So we're going to be watching for that, and to see how they're going to handle these things, because there's so many ways that they could do remittance information to know exactly what's going on. So, and that's partially why we also haven't built anything for you to see at the system yet, because we need more experience with what they're going to do for this stuff to know how we should build it. So then rejected, we'll send you rejections, but you'll also be able to pull it through the scripts once we let those release them. Like I said, there's already ones out there for TCM in the reports portal, clear access page under the claims category. But we have a number of others that we have already created that we want to get somebody to send something so we can see if they're working properly, because it's kind of hard to know it's working without data. So right now there's no method for users to resubmit the rejected claim. So this is where we're monitoring, letting you know, and then you send us a ticket via the help desk with the either secure file exchange with all the information listed there, or you can post it directly in the help desk portal, and then we can update those bills to get resent with your next claims process. If the claim was originally rejected, then we resubmit it as an original claim again, if there's no payments, but otherwise we always refer to the last paid one for doing a replacement or void claim. Automatically again happens. You don't have to worry about that. The system figures this all out for you. So that part, that's really nice. And then they do use remittance advice remark codes. Those are, I think at the end of this, there's a glossary that tells you where you can go find those if you're interested in looking at, but it's the national remittance advice remark codes. So there's that. And then this, This is all currently not, well, this is actually up to date of what we've got planned here, but they may change. So we developed clear access scripts. They come in weekly if you've submitted something to have something outstanding. And there's going to be a paid claims report that shows everything that got paid. There's also existing right now the TCM remitted claims variance report. This is only for TCM because it does some shenanigans because TCM pays a lesser amount than was requested because of that agreement of how that works, that 4% reduction. But there's also this claims remittance history by participant date range that we've updated to include for this purpose. There's also 2 claim summary reports, one for TCM, one for NIFTY, that show all the claims in a given date range and groups by the status of the claim, so you can kind of get a glimpse at, like, you know, these are all outstanding, that they haven't been paid yet, or not remitted yet, I should say, versus what got paid versus what got rejected, etc. It also includes, like, it was rejected and never paid versus rejected and paid prior, because if it was rejected and paid prior, you don't want to include that full rejection amount in what's outstanding, because it's really whatever the difference is between that amount and what was paid prior. So it can get a little confusing in that case, because just because something's rejected doesn't mean that the payment doesn't still apply from before. So you'll double up if you start counting it that way. So we're trying to deal with that by putting it in a different category to make you aware of that. Other things like paid claims, we're only going to obviously look at the only paid claim because for those kinds of reports. But that is something different. That is not an encounter type thing. Encounters are accepted or rejected. And in these cases, it could be rejected, but there's still a payment that still applies until it's replaced by something else. So that's what that category is all about. It also talks about what's been paid in full or paid at less than cost. So it's a pretty comprehensive report to know exactly where you're at. So once we have some data, that will be actually useful to look at. If you try to run it for TCM, it's going to be quite useless because it doesn't have nearly the scenarios that are going to happen with the NIFTY, because it's, you know, so simple in the TCM ones. Then it talks about the user permissions. We've talked about this earlier on the PowerPoint about view and add change permission for the claims processing. And if you're only going to view it, make sure you're only doing the view permission, because you can get to the reports and such that way. There's a glossary at the end. So these words that I'm using in acronyms that are very common in claims life, they're all discussed here. Like CRN is the claim reference number. It identifies the claim. Care plan line number, encounters versus claims, etc. The remark codes that indicates why they've been rejected. And then there's some samples of the reports down here. So verified bills not yet sent, the claim summary, batch summary report example, and then the links here. So this is that link here of where the remittance remark codes are. So if you need to look at those are available there. So so these are just some other information. So now I'll open it up to questions. Let me look at the chat. I think I had one earlier. Where's the information put into Compass that gets pulled by clear access reports for the claims? Let's see. So automatically we process the remittances files from the state. There's no interface for it, but there are some clear access views of the claims that you can see that data from it. So those are the reports I was talking about at the end. So I know this one came in earlier. And I don't think I've put them all up there yet, because like I said, I want to test them with some real data before we do that. So, you know, once we have something to play with, we'll be able to verify that those are correct and get them out there for all of you. So any other questions? You can put it in the chat, or okay, let's see. Jennifer, go if you can unmute yourself, you go ahead.
We're gonna try, but we can't.
Oh, you're echoing.
Hey, Melissa, this is Teresa at Region 4. I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm following some of these things correctly, because I've been a little bit out of the loop on it. But it looks to me that the staff are going to have to enter these claims, the services in 3 different places. Am I right about that? That they're going to have to enter a prior authorization in CHAMPS, wait for an approval code in there, and then it also has to go into the CTA under transition services, and it also has to get entered into MISIS?
Correct. That is correct. The transition services is what they're going to look at to approve said prior authorizations. And then the part in MISIS is to do the actual billing for what happened.
Okay, so the staff here will no longer have. Sorry, I'm always.
That's okay.
The staff aren't going to need the staff at My Choice waiver or stills are the staff at the CLS agents are not going to have to enter prior auths in CHAMPS, just in the transition services in the CTA.
No. So everything needs a prior authorization besides the transition navigation itself. And so that has to get added in CHAMPS for everything. So besides, like I said, the T1016, that gets skipped for the prior authorization part, but anything there's a prior authorization part needs to be in MISIS to bill against, as well as the T1016. And the only thing that's not happening anymore is the exceptions. However, the state did mention that you may be doing exceptions related to those ineligible Medicaid participants. But that would be the only time you do exceptions anymore. In the Nifty portal, that is. That answer your question?
I'm still a little fuzzy, but I might take it offline with you.
Okay.
Others are confused.
So from what my understanding, let me just go through it one more time. So my understanding is that you do the CTA, that's when you plan out what transition services the person's going to need, and you're going to add that into the CTA. And then you're going to enter prior authorizations for everything but T1016 that you put in those transition services. The state's going to give you prior authorization numbers. Once you get that, then you can put them into the MISIS care plans. Well, you could put the MISIS care plans in while you're waiting for a prior authorization number. That, totally can happen. It's just once you get the prior authorization number, you would need to go put that in the template times note. And then when the billing actually happens, you would go in and post the bills in the system. So yes, there's like 3 points of entry to get it in there. One is the planning piece and the CTA of what what you worked out with the person, then getting authorization from the state, and then putting that information in our system in order to order the services, / get them set up to be billed against, and then billing comes in last. And then, like I said, the only thing that I'm still not 100% clear on, I'm not sure if the state really is either, is supposedly with those ineligible bills, ineligible participants, that if they never get on Medicaid, I believe they're going to want you to put exceptions in instead of the prior authorization to get the prior authorization on those to provide those services, if you knew it ahead of time. But if you don't, they told you to wait. So I don't know how much of that's really going to happen. So that's why we didn't really want to cover that per se. Any more questions on that before I move on to the next one?
I think I get it now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so another one came in. Do you have to cancel the claims batch, or can you just click on reprocess after you make changes? Yes, reprocess after you make changes. The only reason you would cancel the batch is if you see that last name or the name differences and the data difference is part of that CHAMPS differences report, and it's totally a different person. That would cause me to go, wait, nope, never mind. Get out of here, cancel. Let's figure that out, because you don't want to accidentally bill under a different person, because that would, be scary. So you would cancel for that reason. And you could also cancel, if you're not, you don't want to do this yet, you've got things to do, or if maybe you had a Medicaid ID or Social Security number change that had happened and you want to actually have that in this whole batch, then you could cancel and start again. But most of the time you're not going to cancel. You're really only going to cancel if you really get stopped at that the name is a whole nother person and you're scared to do anything. You'll just continue and then catch up with whatever next time that may have changed. But reprocess will rerun all of the data behind the scenes to refresh those error reports and can show you what's still left outstanding. So you can reprocess as many times as you want. So maybe you found out a bunch of primary diagnosis issues, so you reprocess, get those fixed, and then you run it, reprocess it, run that report again, those come off, or they don't, and you go, okay, what did I do wrong? Oh, I missed a person, etc. So you can reprocess as many times as you want until you click create batch, and then the process is over at that point. Any other questions? Go ahead, Teresa.
Hey, Melissa, I'm just trying to think through the claims for minutes, the transition navigator time. I understand that you said that we would enter in MICE's care plan lines for either weekly or monthly, and we would just put in some units to be able to build that against, and those are going to be estimations. But then at the end of the month, we're going to have actual minutes. Is the process there going to be that our staff who are producing the claims going to run the transition navigation notes time report out of Clear Access and enter those? Are the minutes going to automatically be pulled in from Compass from the progress notes that the navigators put in and be able to build those easily automatically against the minutes on the care plan line in MICES, or how's that going to work?
So we don't auto hook up anything like that because disasters can happen. But but yes, not everybody tracks their notes that way. So but if you are, yes, you can certainly run that transition navigator progress note report and pull that time to do the billing. Others may want to have their own little logs that they have people fill out. It's up to you of how you want to get it in the system. But yes, you could use definitely that as a resource to do the billing.
Do you know of other processes that others are using that is efficient?
I do not, but is anybody on the call got other things that they could offer up as alternatives? Okay. I mean, as far as I know, that seems to be the most efficient. It's just, if they ended up putting in something wrong, we certainly want to bill it without somebody's eyeballs on it, to make sure that it isn't grossly mistaken. So I'm always hesitant to auto program anything like that. Okay, so another question came in. If the CTA notice has been sent to the state and then another transition service is added at a later date, is it sufficient to just save a copy of the CTA with the new transition for prior authorization to be approved? That's a good question that I do not know the answer to, because that's really a question for the state. I would assume so, because they're going to be always looking at the latest, I think, and that just has then a historical record of it. So I would think that would be appropriate, because they obviously are not going to want to approve another one because you've added, approving another notice, that is, because you just added another transition services. So I would assume they're just looking at, when they go to do it, they're going to look at the transition services that are set up, and they might just look at the living CTA for all I know. I don't know really what their process is going to be on that, but I would think that that would be adequate to just save a copy of it. Got a question of, can you please explain creating the episode? So, I mean, it's basically anything like you do now. Right now, you're adding a nifty person. You could change that process to just create the episode right away and then go and add a nifty record, and then you don't have to worry about it. Or if you've already only got nifty people set up already, then you just go in statewide search, find that person, go to that detail page, and then click the plus button in the episode section, and that will then add an episode for them, and you put in the intake date that way. So you can either start right off the bat and add an episode for new people for this, or if you already got existing people or don't want to use that process until you know for sure you want to do transition services, then you could hold off and create the episode via the statewide search, like you would do any other person at that point. So you have two kind of methods you could do at this point for that. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything coming through the text right now. Feel free to just unmute yourself too as well if you'd like. But I'm sure you're also going to think of things as you go through the process, and feel free to, send help desks about any questions you have going forward. We can try to answer them. Some of it might be state related, like that, save a copy of the CTA. I didn't really read through their FAQs to see if they'd covered that, but that could be another resource that Amanda had sent out. I don't know if that covers that or not. But hopefully we figured out all the bugs and kinks before this happens. But I have a feeling we'll find some nice surprises when some of these go over. So some rejections, but maybe it'll be perfect. I can only hope. So, all right. Well, if there's no other questions, then I will let you have 9 minutes of your day back, and we will send out the presentation that we did, as well as this recording, and the user guide is already in the system. So you already have access to that in the help menu. So thanks everybody, and let us know if you have any questions going forward.